Welcome to the Rent Roll Queen podcast. I'm your host, Tarsi Taylor. Running a real estate business can be tricky with so many aspects to navigate. In this podcast series, I am going through everything that you need to know about running a real estate business, whether you're a seasoned real estate business owner, new business owner, or somebody trying to get into entrepreneurship. This podcast is for you. We're working through social media, buying and selling rent rolls, and how to have a profitable business. So follow, like, and subscribe, and don't miss an episode, and don't forget to share this with your friends in real estate. Welcome back to the Rent Roll Queen podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Buy a Rent Roll, where deals meet destiny. How Joel Davis went from unsuccessful carpenter to successful real estate businessman. Owning two businesses, Image Property, with now over 5,000 properties under management and a sales force of 85, plus StaffLink, who now empowers real estate businesses through VA support throughout Australia. Welcome to the show, Joel. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
So can you give us a little rundown about what you do and who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Not straightforward, but look, I got into real estate back in 2010. You know, at the time, I just had an injury. I was a carpenter by trade and couldn't do that any longer. And thankfully, it's probably the greatest thing that ever happened to me because I was a useless carpenter. I started my career as a property manager in a family-owned business. Yep. Probably the worst 2 years of my life.
Really?
Being a property manager. Not that I think it's a bad job, but I was an incredibly bad property manager. Oh. So for me, you know, I started to really enjoy real estate when I moved into a BDM role. That's when I found it was a much better fit for my skill set and, you know, started to do quite well in that role. Had a partnership with the family business at the time to be able to grow some equity in the business. And over the course of a couple of years, you know, I put on a bit over 400 properties, which allowed me to open my own office in 2015 with 450 properties under management at the time. Since then, we've grown it from 450 properties to a little bit over 5,300 at this point.
It's insane.
We started the sales side of the business in 2019. As of today, we've got about 85 sales agents that sell a bit over 100 properties a month on average at this point. So it's been a really, really significant period of growth for us. And I think back in 2019, at the same time, a lot of the systems and processes that we were having a lot of success with, we realized there was a need for that within the industry as well. Yeah. And that's where StaffLink was born. You know, so for us, it was about being able to not only introduce outsourcing into your business, but be able to introduce it via a platform and a system that was already in place. It was tried, it was tested, it was proven within a business that was still in the market. And, you know, I think for us, that's what really resonated with a lot of the people that we were talking to at the time. I was doing some training for the Real Estate Academy at the time, and that's really where it was born. So, you know, for us, that business has now grown to be a business that supports about 250 businesses across the country, collectively managing a little bit over 180,000 properties on the platform, and collectively selling a bit over 37,000 properties per year using our outsourcing team in the Philippines and using the platform that we set up and roll out with them.
So how did you come to knowing that you needed to implement virtual assistants and so forth into your business? Where did that sort of come into your everyday awareness? Yeah,
look, I was fortunate. I was reading the newspaper one morning and found out that Rental Express had just sold.
Yeah.
Chris Rolls, he was kicking our ass in the market at the time. We always thought we were doing well, putting on 30 or 40 properties a month, and then you'd hear about them putting on 100 a month. So the moment I heard that, I reached out. He was great. He sat down with me over lunch for about 2 hours, told me everything, told me that outsourcing was critical to the growth and the scalability of their business. And so I took that advice. I was on a plane to the Philippines 2 weeks later, hired 2 staff while I was there and spent a week and a half training the initial system and process with them. And the rest is history. It sort of grew from there. Yeah. But very, very grateful that Rolsey was the one who let us know, because their business had just had such extreme growth. Like, you remember Rental Express back then.
I do.
Like, those guys were the original, you know, they were the original beasts in that PM space. Yeah. And so, you know, I was very grateful for the advice, and, you know, we could see what an impact that it had on making their business sustainable once it got to that level of growth. Because they had a few thousand properties at the time. I think at the time of sale, it was a bit over 4,000 properties from memory.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So, look, that was how we got started in that journey.
Yeah. And they had 3 offices, I believe, at that point in time too. So it was quite significant for the, like you said, in the industry, there wasn't anyone else really doing what they had kind of done.
No.
Or in Queensland specifically.
Yeah.
So that was pretty incredible. So for you, how did you find that hiring VAs helped property managers and managing more properties?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think the biggest thing that we know to be true about property management is it's never one thing that kicks your ass. Like, property management is death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
You know, like the average of the tasks that a property manager has to do on a daily basis comes in at over 200.
Yes.
You know, but out of those 200, how many should they actually be doing? You know, like that's probably the take that we have on it. There is obviously so many tasks that a PM does that are critical, you know, because they are relationship building or compliance related. But there's also so many that they do that doesn't matter who does it, you know. And so for us, it was all about being able to segment what was truly important, you know, versus what needed to be done but could be done by anyone. You know, and so for us, when we really sat down and broke those processes down, we identified that there was a really, really significant volume of administration that could be taken off their plate. And it's not always about getting them to manage more property. A lot of the time it's about getting them to manage the properties that they're already managing a lot better.
Well, communication's key, isn't it? And I know you've been in the industry for quite some time, and so have I. And I see a lot of managements walk out the door based on communication.
Yeah.
So it's really important if what your structure is put in place and it allows them to have better communication in the industry, well, then we've got a better outcome all round and a better image overall in our industry with managing properties, with landlords, with tenants and with suppliers as well. So it actually... efficiencies really do help the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think it's absolutely critical. You know, you talk about lost managements.
Yeah.
You know, like that's critical from a business owner's perspective as well, right?
Yeah, it is. And a lot of them don't even know why they've left.
Yeah.
So I still see that.
And look, it's interesting you say communication's often the reason, way more often than people realise. Because when someone says, oh, it was maintenance, it's like, no, it was the communication about the maintenance.
That's right.
That was the issue.
That's right.
You know, so look, I think a lot of the time when people talk to the point of communication not being good enough, there's a missing factor. And often that missing factor is they just didn't have time. It's not that they didn't want to call that person back. It's not that they didn't want to get through their emails for the day. It's that there is actually only so much time in a day.
And that's where VAs come into play, right? Because you actually are giving your property managers some time back or your sales assistants time back in order to actually make those phone calls and make that communication actually happen.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I do think that that's where a lot of people go wrong with outsourcing. You know, there's some stats that you would have just seen if you follow us on socials with regards to the primary reasons people do go down the path of outsourcing. And the number one reason is cost saving. And that just wasn't what it was for us. You know, for us, it was about being able to do more with the time that you already had. You know, it was about being able to give the people that we've got more time, more resources, more support in order to be able to keep those people.
Yeah.
You know, I would say if you had to ask me what the number one thing we've got out of outsourcing was, it was the ability to retain good quality talent, you know, more regularly.
Yes.
You know, because those people, they enjoy the relationship building activities within their role. What they don't enjoy is just going through a checklist of 26 administration items and ticking them off one by one.
Yep, that checklist.
Yeah. And like if anyone who's been a property manager knows, there is more than enough fucking checklists.
There is more than enough checklists. And the other thing too is because you've been able to obviously grow your business sustainably through having VAs and bringing quality to all your landlords and tenants, you've also been able to grow your sales division.
Yeah.
Because of that. So can you tell us a little bit about how you've done that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the opportunities that I had a few years ago was to bring Adam Eppingham into our business. You know, he was a great sales director at the time. He had a real vision of what he thought sales could look like. At the time, we only had 4 or 5 sales agents.
Yeah.
You know, and so Adam and I sat down and looked at the structure that he wanted to roll out. And what was key to it was support for agents. You know, and so the partnership couldn't have been more perfect. You know, what I had built out was an incredible operating platform that gave PMs an incredible level of support. And what he was talking about was just exactly the same thing, but for salespeople.
Yeah.
You know, and so for us, there was a real belief, you know, PMs are often not that great at admin, but Jesus, salespeople, they're really bad at admin. And so they should be. Like, the better you are at sales, the worse you are at admin. Like, those skill sets are diametrically opposed. You know, and so for us, you know, that opportunity was really clear. Let's make sure that we can give these guys all of the support, all of the resources they need so that they can just sell property.
Yeah.
And we'll take care of the administration for them. So that was really key to being able to recruit as well. You know, for us, one of the pieces of recruitment that we were able to leverage was the ability that we would, A, do your admin for you, but B, do it faster than you've ever had done for you before.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't just about being able to take it off their plate. It was about being able to create a process that was superior to anything that they had had in the past. And so a combination of technology and outsourcing enabled us to deliver on that.
Yeah, and you've grown your business substantially since then. So, and that's how you've done it.
Yeah, look, I think it's definitely helped with growth, but again, it's helped with retention as well. You know, I think growth is always only one part of the strategy, right? Like, it doesn't matter how fast you grow. If you can't retain what you're growing, then there's no point. You know, and I think that was a lesson we learnt the hard way at the start. You know, we were really good at growth, but we just didn't have effective structures or processes in place. We just didn't have enough visibility in our business to know what had or had not been done. And so, you know, I remember at the time we had 500 properties, and the worst thing I could imagine was having 5,000. Because if I had 10 times the volume of complaints and problems that I had at that time, mate, I wouldn't have lasted very long.
So you're finding that it's mitigated the loss and you're able to now hold on to those properties a lot better? Yeah.
Look, I think for us now, you know, we know what our avoidable loss rate is. It's very healthy. There will always be an avoidable loss rate.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's a reality that you'll ever get it to zero, but for us, it's definitely at a sustainable level. I also think, you know, avoidable loss is only a metric. Like, the metric that I always get the sense of is if my avoidable loss rate is high, then the staff satisfaction within our business is low. Like, that's actually what I take out of it. Like, when you've got staff that aren't happy or aren't on track, and potentially you've kept some of the wrong people for too long, where you will see it reflected is in your avoidable losses. Because more often than not, avoidable losses is a byproduct of care factor.
It is, yeah. I'm totally agreeing with you. I've seen it all, so I totally agree with you with that. How do you then monitor, I mean, because obviously you're using VAs, how do you monitor that type of consistency or inconsistency in your actual business?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you know, anyone who knows me well would know flags is something that we care about. So flags is just basically rule protocols that we've set up in line with every task that there is in our business. So, you know, every single task is put into a digital platform. That platform then has rules set against the particular task to notify us of when it should be done and if it has not been done by the time it should have been done. And so at the end of each day, we'll get a report that shows us a tally of every single task that was left undone who that was that left that undone. And it gives us a few things. There's always going to be work left undone. You know, what we're looking for is the category 1 tasks that were left undone. You know, because you'll never get everything done. But my belief is that you actually do always have time to get a category 1 task done. And category 1 is defined by being urgent and important. You know, like hot water system. You're not going home until that's done. You know, so for us, that ability to be able to monitor the fact that those things have never been left undone. Then in category 2 tasks, important but not yet urgent. You know, very mindful of how many of them are left undone at the end of a day. And so when we get those tallies, we get it by office, then we get it by individuals as well. And often what happens is you do see a trend upwards of these tasks that have been left undone. And so it's a lead indicator of the fact that that person is under pressure. And so it might be that they're under pressure because of personal factors or work factors. It's not always work. But for us, what that allows us to do is it allows us to step in and give support. Because what happens is if someone doesn't get that support whilst they're under the pump and whilst they're falling behind, it turns into a death spiral. You know, each day you fall further and further behind. The further behind you become, the more reactive you become, the more work there is to be done. And one of the big things that I've learnt over time is once you have left things undone, it's not the same as you might have had 100% of work previously, but as soon as you've left things undone for a period of time, it's now turned into 130 or 140%. because you've now
I've seen it so many times where the staff members have just left it, let it go. And because a lot of times too, and I hate saying this, but a lot of the principals and business owners, they're not actively involved in their property management departments. Generally, they're either sales dominant, or they're just managing a whole business. So they're not actively involved. So they're not even aware of what's actually, what's been missed until, like you said, shit hits the fan. So with that, I guess it's how do you monitor, because then you've got your VAs and so forth. So how are you monitoring your VAs to make sure that they are keeping up with the workload to help the property managers, and then monitor the property managers to make sure that basically everything's aligned and going well so that we can start avoiding this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's identical. So the way we manage onshore and offshore is identical. So the workflow platform that we use, the hub, which is what our workflow is built within, that allows us the visibility of what the onshore have done or have not done. Offshore, same thing. So that's critical, because as an onshore team member, as a property manager, if you've got things that the offshore team are doing for you, sometimes you will just want to go and do it yourself. So for our guys, it's a matter of toggling the bar between onshore and offshore, and then they can see all of their work that is pending offshore. And if they want to do that themselves, they can, and it eliminates it from the workflow of the offshore team at that point.
Right.
So for us, having the management of the onshore and offshore team in the same platform and the same process is critical, because otherwise you've got to learn two totally different systems, which is crazy. So for us, we manage and treat our onshore exactly the same as we do our offshore. Like, there's no real difference in terms of how we delegate the work and how we assess what work has or has not been done, and then how we address what support or training is needed.
So you're watching everything that is going on with your, like the businesses that come on and they're on board with you.
Yep.
You're monitoring what is going on between the agency and the VAs constantly as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can see what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's a really critical part of what we do. Like, people talk about staffing and it's hard to explain what we do, but one of the things we say is we turn the lights on. Like, you can actually see what's going on now. You can actually see what's not done. And, where a lot of people go wrong with outsourcing is they're like, oh, yeah, we tried outsourcing. I'm like, oh, okay, how are you delegating the work? Oh, we just emailed everything over. I'm like, yeah. So how do you know what you've sent them and what has been done or hasn't been done? Like,
where's your tasks to know what's actually been going on?
And then a byproduct of that is that when you're emailing them, you are asking a team offshore to do something differently every single time as well.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I can't see any problems coming off that.
Oh, no, none at all. None at all. Oh, my goodness.
And so for us, every single task has a predetermined method of being delegated.
So you've got a procedure in place that they just have to follow.
Yeah, correct. And they don't actually have to ask for anything. Like, as soon as we have a task that is completed, if there is a vacate completed, then at that point in time, once the onshore PM puts that vacate down as complete, it will automatically trigger the offboarding process that the offshore team can help us with. So if that process was to trigger notification to body corporate or council rates or anything like that, that we are no longer managing this property, please stop sending the mail to us from this property. There is a list. So it
sends out the communication as well to get that sorted, or does that go back to the property manager to sort out?
It'll go back to the offshore. It'll automatically create a list of tasks to be done based on that property. So if that property's profile had it that we were paying the council rates or we were paying the water rates for that owner, then it will automatically create a task for us to notify those authorities of the fact that we no longer manage that property. So it's just about being proactive, and no one needs to tell anyone. Like, there's just a rule systems that's set up in the back of the system, which once you have said that if this and this and this is the case, then it will automatically create those tasks to be done.
That's fabulous. So,
yeah. Look, there's huge wins to it, because whilst outsourcing is a big part of it, we're not all about outsourcing. Like, for us, some things shouldn't be outsourced. They should just be completely automated.
I agree. Yeah.
And so for us, it's not one or the other, it's both.
Another thing that I find as well, a lot of agencies don't know how to use their software correctly to automate.
Yeah.
So when you've got a system that can already be automated like yours, like you said, you've got the hub.
Yeah.
And the hub, I've seen the back end, and I quite like the back end. But when you can basically tick something and all of a sudden it just triggers everything to be done automatically, and you know for sure that that's going to be taken care of, that allows you to relax and basically take on the next next property that you have to actually deal with instead of dealing with that one
That's really
issue.
well said, actually. Like that, we refer to that as decision fatigue.
Yeah.
It's like, do we really need these guys to then go through and say, make sure you do this, 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 and this? Like, we know how that process works. We can create automations that will resolve that from being a task that needs to be delegated. And I think for us, the less decisions that we can have a property manager or an admin person or a sales agent making, the better. Because I am a believer that there is only so many decisions you can make on a daily basis. You know, everyone that works with me for a period of time knows if you want something out of me, get to me early in the day. Like I typically get pretty grumpy and pretty cranky by the end of the day.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Glad I got you on early. Yes.
Yeah, well done. So, yeah, look, I'm a big believer in making sure that we don't get people having to make decisions about things that should already be done.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with that. So for somebody who's got, say, 100 managements, they've literally just got a small portfolio, is it worth them getting a VA?
Yeah, look, it's a tough question. I guess, you know, I guess the questions you would need to ask is, have they got 100 and are they growing by 10 a month?
Yeah.
So if you've got 100 and growing by 10 a month, absolutely, because that means you've got a business that can grow out to 800 based on a level of attrition of 12 to 13%.
Yeah.
You know, and so if that growth trajectory is there, then it's justifiable. If you've got 100 and you're putting on one a month, then mate, you probably can't afford it because you don't have the income.
Yeah, so it's basically you want growth. If you're wanting to grow your business and you actually are taking it serious and you've actually got a trajectory of a future, then it's something that you should really be looking at and getting somebody on board to really assist you with that growth while you continuously, because the other problem we've got in property management is our labour force at the moment.
Yeah.
So you want to keep the best talent for as long as possible, but how do you do that if they're going to become overwhelmed?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's well said. You know, you do need to be a business that is, you know, you've got a plan, you know, you're serious about it. You're actually trying to make the business more sustainable, more scalable. You know, I think as soon as you do that, the business becomes more saleable as well. You know, and I think that's really what we are perfect for is businesses with that growth mindset.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, look, I don't think that it's off the table for anybody, but you know, there are businesses out there that have 100 and 200 properties and that's all they want.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
And at that point in time, you don't need to go down the path of developing, you know, significant structure and process and mandating it because honestly, there's probably only one person in the business. So,
well, that's true. And the thing is, June, I just want to go back to what you said about having a saleable business, right? Because your rent roll is your saleable asset.
Yeah.
And I do due diligence. That's what I do. So if somebody else can, you know, make sure that all the process and procedures have been followed correctly and you can get that down right when it comes to due diligence and I've got to go in on behalf of a buyer and scrutinize the portfolio, it would make things a lot better and allow you to keep that, you know, saleable asset as high as possible so that you can get, you know, retain basically the highest multiplier in the market. Yeah,
definitely. And look, we've seen that. We've seen within our client base, we have had transactions, even one for myself, a business on the Sunshine Coast that was a client of ours, and he approached me and said, look, I'm selling the business, thought I'd ask and see if you're interested. Like my level of due diligence on that business was so low because I already knew it.
Yeah.
You know, like we had the visibility through the platform to see exactly what had and had not been done. We knew exactly where it was at. And so for us, we were actually happy to pay a higher multiple for it.
Yeah, because you knew it had been maintained and looked after the whole time.
Yeah,
so.
And we also knew that we weren't going to have to come in and completely overhaul it.
Yeah.
You know, like we also were willing to pay a premium for the fact that they'd done a lot of the work with rolling out that system, process and structure that we like. So for us, look, we would always be happy to pay a higher multiple for a business that already had that in place. Because honestly, like you go to assess some of these businesses. I'm in the market for a rent roll at the moment, and there was a business that we looked at recently and stopped looking at it pretty quickly. You know, it's still on rest. You know, it's not yet cloud based.
There's so many of those that are still there that are not cloud based, or they're still paper, like they're not a paperless office.
No.
It's
just too hard. It's like, where do I start with this?
Yeah.
Like, and so for us, that's what ruled it out. You know? There was too much work to be done. So, look, I get that whole mindset of some people like, oh, look, I'm only in the business for another 3 or 4 years. I don't want to go down the path of doing all this, you know, but the reality is it costs you on the way out.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm hearing you totally. in my head, I'm just like, yeah, there's those offices that don't actually roll it out and haven't got those process and procedures in place. They are losing money at the end of their sale. You know, instead of they're retiring and they could have achieved so much more at retirement.
Yeah, look, it's
and
massive.
They haven't,
well, you think about it, right? Like if you're talking about a business with 1,000 properties and it changes the multiple even by 0.2, like you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars at that point.
Well, I've just done one recently where it was they don't have any VAs in their office or anything like that, and it's been a long established office, but they hadn't done anything about changing over the paperwork, or they were still a paper office. So that made that transaction, basically the buyer was able to renegotiate the multiplier on that.
Yeah.
So they've actually lost money in their sale process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely something I
Yeah,
can appreciate.
I love how like with StaffLink, because of your process, like you said, they've been able to achieve a higher multiplier. So that's really important too. If you're not only looking at getting a VA just for the daily operation, you're basically getting a VA to assist you to maintain that high multiplier at the end of the day.
Yeah, look, and like obviously the VA is the byproduct almost. Like the systems and processes that you have to put in place to make it work effectively, that's just good business.
Yeah.
But the trigger that forces it is when you want something to get done effectively in a different country, like at that point in time, those systems and processes need to be incredibly clear. You know, you need to typically have workflows that are documented. You need to have process maps that are accurate and live and up to date. You need to typically have an LMS, you know, a learning management system that exists in the business that is kept up to date. And so once you've got those things, absolutely, that changes the saleability of your business. There's no two ways about it. You know, when we show somebody that comes into our business the level of documentation that we have, it's also a really effective recruitment tool. You know, when we've got PMs that are coming into the industry, you know, like for us, a lot of them will go into a business where it's like, oh, look, just sit beside Jody and Jody's going to show you the ropes. It's 2024.
Yeah.
Probably time to have...
We need to be a bit more proactive than what we used to be, But it's finding time to do that as well. So we're just in an industry that's very time poor.
Yeah.
So it's also good when you can basically outsource and somebody can train. You know, if you're going to outsource to a VA, know that they're going to be able to be trained, know that they've got the time, you know, like you've got the time, you've got the checklist, you've got the resources to actually implement proper people into that business. Yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing people get out of working with us is you don't actually have to create it all for yourself. Like we are giving systems and process that are already live. You know, they are kept up to date. You know, they are being used to manage over 190,000 properties now. So, you know, and mate, they're always having to change with how frequently the government is introducing legislation.
And that's not going to stop. No. It won't stop. It's just gonna get more and more difficult. So
And look, I think that's good. To be perfectly honest, I think the harder it gets, the higher the bar of entry becomes. And I think if you want to know one of the reasons why we're you know struggling in this industry is sometimes the bar has been too low for too long.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if anybody and everybody can get in, what do we expect?
Well, we've seen it ourselves, haven't we?
Yeah.
Joel, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate all your insights into StaffLink and how you've grown Image. That's absolutely incredible what you guys have done with over 5,000 properties, 85 salespeople. That's just absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
And you have done that with the help of VAs. So I will put all your details into the podcast caption, and anyone that wants to reach out and have a conversation with you and StaffLink about VAs, all the contact details will be there.
Brilliant. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No worries.